G'day YouTube, warbles on a lot here. Sunday afternoon ride, going to town to get some bread. And we're trying out a new, well, a modification to the old camera mount, but in terms of camera angle, you might as well call it a new camera mounting. Have no idea what your view of this is, because this is the very first time I've used it. And just to double up, we've got the new microphone as well. So let's see if we can get to town and back. Well, I'll probably only record on the way in, but we have back and front brakes, and these damn sheep that keep trespassing. Every time they come in, I evict them. Open the gate, put them out through it. So, I guess this is going to have to be episode 19 of the Trumpocalypse Chronicles. It's now several days since the Guadalupe River flooded in Texas. We've now got a bit better idea of what actually happened. Apparently the very first storm warnings went out 4 o'clock the afternoon. And although there were a sufficient number of weather forecasters, in fact they'd actually put a few extra ones on just for the occasion. But part of DOGE's cuts was they got rid of the particular individual who had 20 or 30 years experience, plus all the contacts and the contact numbers and the telephone tree, to know who to contact when the warnings started to emanate from the weather forecasters. And holiday weekenditis and all the other bureaucratic tomfoolery. So yeah. Meanwhile, last time Mr. Trump was the president, all the councils along the Guadalupe asked for some federal assistance money to put sirens up on top of towers to tell everybody to have a look at your phone and see what the flood warning is. But Mr. Trump's government said that wasn't a priority, so therefore what little money they had, they spent on paying more money to their police at a local level. So I'm sure that worked out well for them. They had more police not taking any notice of the flood warnings they didn't get. And poor old Mr. Trump's deeply unhappy on the grounds that nobody wants to forget about the Epstein files after he got elected, basically on the coat strings of a whole mob of conspiracy theorists, all of whom reckon that, seen as he and Epstein described each other as being among their best friends, the only possible reason at this stage for him to block the release of all of the Epstein paperwork and investigations is because he's in it. So he's losing support with his base, you know, the rusted on, the people who didn't understand any of the tariff stuff, don't understand economics. They just know that Trump is on their side because, you know, God sent him to look after those particular individuals. They're spitting the dummy over the Epstein thing. All at the same time, Trumpy finally realised that Putin's not interested in doing anything Trumpy says should be done. It turns out that when Trumpy said that the Houthis capitulated in Yemen, they did no such thing. They sunk 2 more boats last week. On the matter of the Iranian uranium enrichment facility deep underground, somewhere between 100 and 160 metres underneath surface level at the ventilation shaft is the tunnel which leads horizontally to the gallery, which is full of the centrifuges and the offices down there. And the ventilation shaft is sort of like in the valley between the mountains, and the facility itself is under the mountain and it's granite. And yeah, the Yanks are saying, oh well, we had 2 blokes spend 15 years thinking about it and we designed a special bomb just for attacking deep bunkers. Well, I seem to recall that the special bomb they're talking about was actually designed to go after a cave in Afghanistan, because when they tried going after the cave in Afghanistan with the Moab, massive airborne ordnance bomb, it didn't do much to the underground cave. So they designed something that'd be really good for going about 50 feet underground. And that's what the massive ordnance penetrator, weighing in at 13.5 tonnes and half of that is the steel casing, it's actually supposed to penetrate 50 feet of concrete. Now, if you design something to go through 50 foot of solid stone or masonry, and it goes 50 feet into a granite mountain and it explodes, there's going to be a lot of rubble. You drop the next one, how far is the next one going to actually penetrate? And when it penetrates, it doesn't have solid stone to transmit its shock into. It has broken stone. And from what I can make out, nobody really knows what actual effect dropping 6 down one hole is going to do. When you do get down to the bottom of the hole, if you get down to the bottom of the hole, you then got about a kilometre long tunnel with glass doors installed to prevent a megaton level surface detonation of a military warhead purely designed to try and shake the mountain down onto the facility. So I'm not entirely certain that 6 lots of 6 tonnes, so you got 36 tonnes of explosive delivered, well, one lot goes off 50 feet below ground level, and the next 5 lots of 6,000 pounds, they're going to go off somewhere inside the mountain a mile away from what you're trying to break. I don't think there's too many people agree with Trump's assessment that Iran's nuclear manufacturing, refining, bomb building capacity has been obliterated. Reduced, inconvenient, but not obliterated. And of course I've still got no idea what this is recording and how loud the wind noise is on that microphone. But we will see what we will see. And I find myself bemused by the fact that the statisticians who keep count of who's murdered more people than whom, they've come up with the idea that the cuts, just going to have to move this fella. Not a good spot. Off you come. You're not supposed to run into the lights. Yeah. So where were we talking about the Yankees? What? Oh shit, another one. Sorry, that one stuck too hard. We don't call it the Tarmac Arena for nothing, do we? Yeah, so anyway, the US has discovered that you can bomb Yemen 800 aeroplane loads full, and you succeed in having one of your destroyers shoot down one of your jet aeroplanes trying to land on your aircraft carrier, and then another one of your jet aeroplanes falls off the side of the aircraft carrier when the aircraft carrier is doing sudden super steep zigzaggedy turns trying to get out of the way of the incoming Houthi missiles. And then you have another aeroplane coming in to land, and the pilot buggers that one up and he goes off the end. And as he goes off the end, he jumps out of it. So you sink 3 aeroplanes. I think it was 3. In launching 800 airstrikes against the Houthis, who, when it's all said and done, they've been living on the receiving end of airstrikes from American manufactured ordnance delivered by the Saudis for, is it 15 years or 20 years? You know, like, they're pretty good at putting up with that. They know what to do, they know how to do it, and they've had practice. So now there's no International Atomic Energy Commission inspectors going into Iran at all. Everybody in Iran who used to have the shits with their Ayatollah is now feeling pretty good about the Ayatollah because, you know, basically, the Americans did their nastiest and it didn't help. Even after the Israelis had spent a fortnight wiping out all the Iranian anti-aircraft defences. And a bit of a side issue, but apparently most of the early damage to Iranian anti-aircraft defences were not achieved by airstrikes, they were achieved by terrorists. People working behind their enemy lines, doing covert operations, jumping out at the last minute and blowing shit up by surprise. And just as it was when Joseph Goebbels first invented the word terrorist, before Goebbels, if you threw explosives at civilians for political reasons, you were called an anarchist. But when the Royal Air Force bombed Rostock and Lübeck and started burning German civilians in order to upset their war effort, that's when Goebbels started talking about terror fleegers. Flying terrorists who sit up there in the sky and drop explosives and incendiaries on peaceful civilian women and children. And of course at the end, well, after that the Germans extended the term terrorist to mean anybody who shot at their forces from the sidelines. So all the German casualties who were shot by French resistance fighters, partisans, marquis, all of those dead Germans had on their their death certificate killed by terrorists, because it was someone wearing his Sunday best clothes and a beret who shot the German invaders. Partisan forces in Ukraine and Yugoslavia, they were all tagged as being terrorists by the Germans. And then Germany lost the war, and behold, the very first terrorists to be locked up after the end of the Second World War, well, it was in the British mandated state of Palestine, and it was Yitzhak Rabin and Ariel Sharon. And they were locked up for wearing dresses and wigs and high-heeled shoes and lipstick. And it wasn't the fact that they were in drag, you know, like they weren't arrested for being LGBTQI. Oh no, two Prime Ministers of Israel were arrested for being Zionist terrorists because they'd been throwing hand grenades in Arab coffee shops and then using stolen British Sten guns for submachine gun to stun survivors. Gunning the sun. And then pressure from the Europeans, the surviving European Jews, to go back to live where they come from in Europe, was such that it didn't matter what the Palestinians thought, it didn't matter what the Arabs thought. The Europeans wanted all the Jews that Hitler did not kill, they wanted them out of Europe. So they subsidised stealing Palestine and putting them there instead. I wonder what's going to happen to the state of Israel when the nation of America is or USA is no longer capable or so inclined to continue to supply Israel with all of the prodigious quantities of death machines which they've been consuming recently in their attempts to reduce the population of Gaza. I mean, they've recorded themselves and broadcast themselves on TikTok laughing and dancing as they plant explosives in Gazan houses on the idea that they're not going to have anywhere to come back to. there's no secret. Israel is ethnically cleansing Gaza. They run it as the biggest concentration camp since Auschwitz closed, and then they're going to do the final solution. Kick out UNICEF and the United Nations and anybody else who's feeding the children. Appoint a corrupt contracting company which says it's going to bring food in, and then station Israeli snipers around the food distribution point and just shoot everybody who comes and tries to collect food. And then the international Israeli diaspora, they immediately act in unison, you know, gang up basically on anybody in the mainstream media who dares to report on, you know, anything like an international court finding that Israel is committing genocide by denying food and medical supplies to the entire population, rather than merely fighting with its military opponent. It's a situation which is unlikely to resolve peacefully unless most of the people concerned wake up to themselves and accept the fact that just because they are frightened that their next door neighbour might perhaps one day take it into their head to do something horribly violent or stupid, that does not give them the right to preemptively kill their neighbour and burn his house down just to make sure that it's easier to sleep peacefully at night for the person with the paranoid persecution fantasies. The fact is that everybody who ever decided that might is right and that they're going to ensure peace through superior firepower, they seem to have forgotten the fact that one day their gun's going to get old and out of date and they're going to be too bloody old and feeble to want to lift it up and wave it around and point it at everybody they once upon a time used to be able to keep in check by the use of fear. 80% of the battery remaining, and I hadn't ridden the thing since, I think it was the 5th, and it's the 13th. Oh, it's doing alright. But the longer you leave the battery in the spare bunkroom above the hot air outlet from the thermostat and the ducted central heating, the longer the battery stays out of the bike, the less range you've got when you do go to use the battery. How that goes on camera, but of course this could turn out to be all framed on the sky or perhaps all framed on the underside of my helmet, so I'm not quite sure whether this will go through to the keeper. But yeah, it seems the amount of money that the great big abominable bill is shoveling towards the ICE organisation is such that currently ICE is 45% the size of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. It's now got enough money to grow up to become 45 times the size of the FBI. And whereas to get to be an FBI agent you need a university degree in law or criminology and it's something pertinent to the field. to get into ICE, you've got to be the sort of person who couldn't get into the police, couldn't get into the military or got kicked out of the military, couldn't pass the test for a private security guard, and just a festering little keyboard warrior with delusions of adequacy, wanting to make yourself feel better by beating somebody else up. If that sounds like you, they'll pay you $10,000 joining bonus. So they will. Okay, 15 kilometres, 49.67 kilometres total, 24 minutes, 39 kilometres an hour. And that time, I don't know whether that's time riding, it probably is. Got to be a little bit careful taking these gauntlets off, and we're sitting on 78%. We would normally be on about 84. But like I said, bike's had some time. I wonder how that went. Find out later. Warbles on like the YouTube. Ciao.